Today, we are unfortunately witnessing the deterioration of basic human rights and due processes in Armenia. The treatment of political prisoners is one such area of concern, where documented cases of unnecessary arrests and prolonged, unjustified imprisonments of outspoken opposition leaders or civilians are becoming commonplace. So is the violent suppression of the people's rights to peaceful protest. Perhaps most important is the plight of our prisoners of war currently in captivity in Azerbaijan, a plight having fallen on deaf ears both in Armenia and in the civilized world. By most accounts, there are at least 118 prisoners of war still in captivity almost 2 years post-conflict, with Azerbaijan only accounting for 33. These prisoners of war have no access to due process or legal representation. Tonight, we are fortunate to host an interactive panel discussion on these topics and more with champions of human rights from Armenia, attorneys Siranush Sahakyan and Arman Tatoyan. We acknowledge that these are early hours in Yerevan, and we appreciate you accepting our invitation and offering your time and expertise to us and our guests. The interactive panel discussion today will highlight the key challenges facing Armenia and Artsakh, such as the status of the Armenian prisoners of war in Azerbaijan, abuses of power, police brutality and human rights violations in Armenia, and disregard for the rule of law and due process with respect to political prisoners, among other topics. A well-informed and engaged diaspora is an essential component for the survival and prosperity of the Armenian nation and statehood. As such, we encourage the audience to engage with the panelists by posing questions which we will collect and offer after each speaker presents their points. Please place your questions in the chat, and we will utilize them in the Q&A after Attorney Sahakyan and Dr. Tatoyan offer their initial comments. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing our first speaker for today, Attorney Siranush Sahakyan. Currently serving as the chairwoman of the graduate programs in human rights and social justice at the American University of Armenia, Attorney Sahakyan has more than 15 years of experience in judicial reforms and corruption prevention. Previously, she worked at the Ministry of Justice, the administration of the President of Armenia, chaired the Corruption Prevention Agency, and acted as an ad hoc judge at the European Court of Human Rights. Attorney Sahakyan is also a licensed attorney in private practice and serves as chair of the NGO IC Law Armenia. Welcome, Attorney Sahakyan.
Thank you. So I would also like to extend my thank you to the organizers for this unique chance to exchange thoughts on human rights concerns in Armenia and Artsakh. So indeed, after revolution, there was an expectation that rule of law will be more strengthened in Armenia and will be able to build a new quality of democracy. But unfortunately, since then, many incidents happened which confirmed the opposite developments in the country. We all, and also the world, witnessed some developments concerning the judiciary, particularly the order coming from Prime Minister to ban the entries to court houses because undesirable decision was made by a bold judge in Armenia. This incident really was unprecedented in light of international practice as well. This was an example of interference by the executive into judicial affairs, but it went unpunished. So actually, the society raised some concerns, but in any case, it tolerated such types of attacks against the judiciary. Then we witnessed another serious violation, which concerns premature termination of the powers of the Constitutional Court. And of course, we have a legal case pending before the European Court of Human Rights, and I have the honor to represent all the judges whose powers were unlawfully terminated in advance. But all these attacks against judiciary, they are in organic chain with developments concerning Artsakh and Armenia in relations with Turkey and Azerbaijan. We all know that constitutional courts have special role in exercising constitutional review on international treaties, sometimes may be called declarations concluded between different states. And from this perspective, this trilateral declaration statement that was signed on November 9 is of particular importance. So the Constitutional Court with the new composition was unable to address the demands and to serve as a filtering institution protecting national interests whenever declarations or treaties were unilaterally signed by the executive body. And we didn't have any independent authority reviewing this process of concluding and enforcing a trilateral statement. But for today's discussion, I specifically separated two issues which are debatable. The first has an external dimension. It's the issue of Armenian prisoners of war. And the second, which is quite new, prosecution or attacks against diaspora members who expressed thoughts not favoring the strategy of Armenian authorities concerning Armenia, Turkey, and Armenia-Azerbaijan relations when they were banned to access the country. So I'll start from the first issue, prisoners of war. 2 years after the end of active hostilities, this issue is not resolved, and we have different problems here. The first one is underestimate of the real number of prisoners of war. Of course, Azerbaijan artificially reduces the number, and it only acknowledged the captivity of 38 people, while the fact-finding of non-governmental organizations indicates that at least 80 additional people were captured. And interestingly, international non-governmental organizations, they also report that Azerbaijan does not confirm all the captives, and many people were subjected to enforced disappearance. But even under these conditions, the country's prime minister, when talking nationally or internationally about the issue of prisoners, presents the numbers that are legitimized or officialized by the Baku authorities, particularly our public officials. They endorse the number of 38, which of course creates obstacles in achieving final acknowledgement, confirmation of the captivity of remaining 80 people. The second problem that the issue was politicized, and for a long period of time there is no progress in repatriation. The last repatriation happened in the beginning of February this year. Only 10 people were repatriated, but since then there is no progress. So no development in terms of returning POWs. Only one repatriation happened meantime concerning Eduard Martirosov, who happens to be linked with incidents close to Armenian boundaries. Under unknown circumstances, he ended up in Azerbaijan, so he was disappeared from his position and ended up in an Azerbaijani position, which was very close. And with the help of Russian peacekeepers, his repatriation was made. But we don't have any new case since February when captives taken into captivity during the war or afterward period were able to return to Armenia. And despite the rules of international humanitarian law, which require immediate, quick repatriation, this obligation is not charged by Azerbaijan. The third problem that there was a decline of Armenian government's request to release Armenian prisoners of war during ICJ proceedings. Of course, we have a very positive development when Armenia brought an interstate claim against Azerbaijan before International Court of Justice. So both countries haven't recognized the jurisdiction of the court on all international legal matters. But at least based on human rights treaties, there is a possibility to have an international legal dispute. And such possibility was provided by the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and Armenia brought a case against Azerbaijan. And in the frame of this case, the issue of release of prisoners of war was raised before international court, but which unfortunately was rejected. And under this condition, in a short and medium term, the issue remained exclusively on the political platform, because Azerbaijan realized that as an interim measure, there was no possibility for Armenian side to achieve a legal decision on release of Armenian prisoners of war. So at this moment, they see the problem only on the political platform, which creates additional burden for Armenian side. Those political negotiations are not effective. Armenian side has no big bargaining power, and repatriation is connected with concessions. We witnessed that repatriation was ensured in exchange for minefield maps. Currently, it is highly connected with the Azerbaijani demand on withdrawal of Armenian troops from Artsakh. And obviously, we understand that Baku's political demands are endless, and we never can achieve resolution of this issue by meeting all their political demands. But with all this, we see a discussion between Armenian and Azerbaijani authorities, sometimes accompanied with public statements that Armenian side is quite satisfied with productive and constructive approach of Azerbaijani side. And pro-Armenian negotiations are not facilitated by important players because there is a competition between West and Russia, and they try to reposition themselves in the region. And sadly, in order to serve the interest of their own countries, they improve relations with Turkey, Azerbaijan, promising some concessions at the expense of Armenia. And despite the reliable evidence of serious gross human rights violations during the war and before and after in respect of own nationals, neither Azerbaijan nor any official of Azerbaijan has been targeted by American and Western sanction, which creates some supportive environment. Recently, again, we saw the handshaking between Aliyev and prominent European leaders around energetic transaction. They see Azerbaijan as a reliable partner in a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. In order to solve this issue of prisoners of war, we don't have also promising political preconditions. In order to justify this delay, the remaining acknowledged prisoners of war, they are brought to so-called justice, and unlawful punishments are imposed on them based on different charges. The evidence is definitely falsified, but with the help of legal proceedings, Azerbaijan provides justification for delaying the repatriation of Armenian prisoners of war. Now I'll turn to the second question. After the war, of course, there was disappointment and activism was rising, and many demonstrations happened abroad, criticizing the policy of Armenian government towards Turkey and Azerbaijan. Diaspora Armenian figures who spoke in favor of sovereignty of Artsakh and Armenia and objected the concessions currently being negotiated by Armenian authorities are now attacked. And the same methods of repression are chosen, which are typical to Turkish and Azerbaijani authorities. Particularly, we have currently two episodes when Armenians were, ban was imposed on Armenians to re-enter into Armenia for their activities and opinions concerning Armenian issues. Definitely we have interference with freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. The state authorities also violated right to privacy. They rejected provision of information to individuals subjected to restrictions. But meanwhile, they publicized the name and also the grounds why the ban was imposed, violating all the provisions relating to protection of personal data. Of course, the reasoning of national security authorities does not give an explanation how and why exactly they deemed those individuals harmful to the national security of Armenia. But even without having proper factual and legal background, they impose restrictions, and we see that there would be a tendency of such activities. Of course, legal actions are relevant in this situation, and we have well-developed case law from the European Court. There is a possibility of international protection, and currently national proceedings are in process aimed at challenging the actions of National Security Service before administrative courts. We do hope that some members of judiciary will be able to deliver independent judgments, and there is a possibility of resolution of issue domestically. Otherwise, another proceedings will be opened against Armenia concerning these unlawful bans imposed on Armenians concerning their entry into Armenia. Again, this Cox versus Turkey is a good precedent which gives all the guidelines for the protection of human rights. So I'll end here, and I'm happy to address the questions afterward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insightful comments, Attorney Sahakyan. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Our second panelist is Dr. Arman Tatoyan. He obtained his LLB, LLM, and Ph.D. degrees from Yerevan State University and a Master in Law degree from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. He has served as a human rights defender of Armenia and the head of the National Preventive Mechanism from 2016 to 2022, elected by the RA National Assembly. Dr. Tatoyan has served as an ad hoc judge at the European Court of Human Rights from 2016 to 2019, and as the Deputy Minister of Justice of Armenia and the Deputy Representative of Armenia at the European Court of Human Rights from 2013 to 2016. Welcome, Dr. Tatoyan.
Hello to everyone, and I'm very happy to greet our compatriots and to see them in this very important discussion. Well, this is a very important topic, and today I would like to focus on, there are several issues, but I would like to focus on the, as you said in your introduction, about the challenges that our nation unfortunately is facing right now. I would like to highlight several components, let's say, and the problems. So first thing is that one of the main, the biggest challenge, of course, is the policy of hatred and Armenophobia that is still is largely sponsored and by the government of Azerbaijan, and was largely supported by Turkey. This policy has a strategic and political nature for the authorities of Azerbaijan. And after the war, I have to say that our monitoring, my monitoring and of my team, in my capacity as the human rights defender, we prepared and submitted several reports, evidence-based reports, that this policy after the war, it even intensified. It got intensified, and Azerbaijani authorities, it is very openly are speaking about so-called peace, which is fictitious peace building, I have to say, with threats. And you will never find words of Azerbaijani authorities about peace, about continuation of civil life without threats that directed towards the Armenian nation. And by the way, I have to say that this hatred is directed not only against Armenians of Artsakh, although I have to say that this is the most aggressive part of this hatred, let's say, but all Armenians. And this policy has its clear consequences, not only for Armenia, for Artsakh, but also for Armenians who live in other countries of the world, because this hatred is this policy is on purpose creating the atmosphere of animosity between the two nations in the whole world, in the entire world. And we have to connect with this another problem, which unfortunately we have since the end of the war. This is the illegal, completely illegal, I would say criminal location of Azerbaijani armed forces near our villages. And I'm speaking here not only about Artsakh, but also about Armenia. Well, I will start from Armenia. All of us know about their illegal criminal locations by nature in Syunik and Yerevan provinces. Azerbaijani military troops invaded. We have at least four cases of incursion inside the territory of Armenia since the end of the war. They are not only in the immediate vicinity of our villages, but on the roads that are connecting our communities. And I have to say that, unfortunately, Armenian authorities who are building so-called alternative roads, these alternative so-called roads are also under direct target of Azerbaijani military forces, of Azerbaijani armed forces. There are even, in some roads, you can see it even when one takes the road, Azerbaijani armed forces are easily noticeable, not far from the road, who are armed, and unfortunately they keep also under their target the villages and our communities. So with their locations, we have total violation of, we speak, and our international colleagues very often like to speak, of course, about human rights, but I have to say that we have total violation of, gross violations of human rights of our compatriots who live in bordering areas. These are, first of all, right to life, security, right to property. These people are present in the lands and houses that belong to our citizens by their certificates, legally endorsed by the authorities of Armenia. And moreover, we have even territories, lands, arable lands, for example, houses that legally belong to our citizens based on documentation issued by Soviet, even Armenian authorities. So we have also problems, huge problems with other rights, such as privacy. For instance, Vorodan village, if we take, there is a very famous so-called building or a house which belongs to an Armenian citizen, where Azerbaijan, we have location of Azerbaijani and Russian troops. So Azerbaijanis have installed their cameras, for example, about 10 cameras, very powerful CCTVs or cameras that keep under the control even houses of people. I have been personally, I was in the houses of these people, and they told me that if Azerbaijani military notices some movement in those houses, for instance, they have guests, I don't know, or themselves, they're moving around and they use their house, Azerbaijanis immediately turn their cameras towards the houses, and they control inside the house. And then we observed this because when we visited this house, and when Azerbaijanis noticed us, they immediately turn their cameras towards us, towards our direction, and where it was very clear that they are controlling, monitoring inside the house. But there is no privacy, which is another problem. Their presence denied, or their presence led, because of their presence, we have villages in Armenia that have no water at all. For instance, Yerevan province. You know that in Yerevan, from Verin Shorja, from Sotk, this is in Vartenis community, to other communities, other villages such as Kut, such as Verin Shorja, and more. So Azerbaijanis are present exactly in places where we have where sources of water, drinkable water, are being generated, and this water this water is for this providing water for all these places are providing water for the villages, neighboring villages. In many places, Azerbaijanis are exactly present in the places of these sources of water, and they blocked all these sources. Now we have villages that do not have water at all. So and access to water is endangered, seriously endangered in Syunik, because they're present in the area of Sevlich, Black Lake, and this lake and the area is providing water to about, if I'm not mistaken, several, if I remember correctly, up to 50 and more civilian communities. So we have the same problems, I have to say, in Artsakh, of course, with aggressive, very aggressive forms of its forms, let's say. And when I was last time in Artsakh, I restated my statement of facts, what Azerbaijanis were doing, not only with Perzor, with Aravno, and we speak a lot about these villages, unfortunately, because there is a huge problem with them. But not only these villages, other villages as well. For instance, villages of Martuni, I don't know, everywhere where Azerbaijanis are located close to our bordering villages. They turn into a hell, I have to say, a nightmare, a life of our compatriots. And you know, there is a very international principle provided by the UN. No human right should be human right should be ignored, and no one should be left aside. Unfortunately, this principle is just a very nice expression written, you know, on the website of this international organization, because it is not practical. It is not effective and efficient for our citizens. And openly, we can say that Azerbaijanis are openly they're carrying out an open genocidal policy. This is an open genocidal policy, starting from their shootings, killings, ending up with these serious violations by which they turn, they make impossible normal life of people, whereas international principles clearly state that as a result of any border-related issue, any war, normal life of civilians cannot be turned or cannot be destroyed. But here we have total collapse of normal life of people. Another problem which I would like to refer to is the so-called peace building or the era of peace building or peace. You know, peace is an absolute category for us, absolute value, and I think that our nation, our people, understand very well the essence, the value of peace. What does it mean to have peace? But in this case, we have only fictitious peace from the side of Azerbaijan, fictitious peace building. And I have a special report last year issued with the facts presenting their fictitious peace building, so-called track 2 peace building. They're promoting largely, you know, before international organizations, that they are peace builders, they want peace. They are largely promoting, I don't know, so-called civil societies from their side. But at the same time, they continue the policy of hatred and animosity, because peace, so-called peace building for Azerbaijani authorities is a curtain for international community in order to cover their real policy, to hide their real policy. That is why with facts, we have to show to international community all these policies, which is a huge problem. Another thing is that, you know, we have always to have in mind that Azerbaijani authorities so far there was no responsibility for them. There was no punishment so far for the war crimes, for the crimes against humanity that they committed during the war and after the war. And they continue to commit. And that is why this impunity leads to more crimes, leads to more problems. And that is why we have to have this also in mind, which is, I think, very important. Unfortunately, their policy leads also to the problem related to IDPs. We have internally displaced persons. We have right now, what is happening right now in Aravno, in Berzor, we can clearly see it. We have internally displaced people, unfortunately, which is the result of, I would say, of a very problematic not a problematic as a result of the policy that is being carried out by the authorities of Armenia. Because this policy only creates grounds for Azerbaijan, you know, to opening up their hands, let's say, because this has been always the case that unfortunately Armenian authorities are not using this the international mechanisms properly. And moreover, there are many politicians who hold public offices, public posts in Armenia, who make expressions, to carry out policies that strengthen Azerbaijani interests and strengthen Azerbaijani policies. For instance, we have officials, public high-level officials, who may say that, you know, Azerbaijani locations near our villages are legal. This is their own positions. We can do nothing. This is they are located in their positions. Of course, this is a legitimate. They are legitimizing their presence, which is a huge problem. Or let's say an expression which is completely unacceptable to say that we have Armenia has Azerbaijani lands. There are Azerbaijani lands under Armenian control. These are expressions by that are or words expressed by our public officials, which is nonsense, because we do not have this kind of territories. Everything is Armenian, and Azerbaijanis have been occupying all these territories, and they continue to do this. Coming to the end of my presentation, I would like also to say couple of words about prisoners of war. Ms. Sahakyan presented it properly, but I have to say that our prisoners of war continue to be held in Azerbaijan in complete, total violation of international law. Any, you know, one may not find even a single law that is not violated, an article even that is not violated by Azerbaijan. I have to say that this is even open trafficking in human beings, because what they do, they keep these people, they bargain. They try to use this issue in negotiations, I don't know, require some control over some territories. And moreover, their locations, illegal locations near our villages is also a huge threat, you know, for the future, because we could see, for instance, in November last year, that Azerbaijani military could illegally take new prisoners of war not far from Ishkhanasar in the Sunni village. Unfortunately, these people even were subject to bargaining and this trafficking. And I would like to, since there is no time left, but some 2 or 3 minutes, if I may, to speak about the judiciary. My colleague spoke about the judiciary, the problems. I would say, you know, a very interesting thing, that judges who were serving the previous authorities before 2018 are happily serving the current authorities. And I have to say that they are most protected group of judges in the system judiciary, unfortunately. And those judges who were considered to be impartial before 2018 now are under huge, let's say, intensive persecutions and pressure, unfortunately. And in my capacity as the human rights defender, I issued a special report presenting their problems in different courts and illegalities that are being committed by presidents of courts, such as administrative court, for example, I don't know, or the president of the court of Yerevan, first instance court. These are violations that definitely, I'm sure, should be subject for criminal prosecutions, even to investigate the violations. Yeah. So this was the main presentation, I think. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm also ready to answer questions that our compatriots may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your insightful comments as well, Dr. Tatoyan. We've compiled several questions and grouped them thematically so that we can address all points that interest the audience today. So we'll start with the following. So with regard to the prisoners of war, are they in contact with their families, or do they have visitations from the Red Cross? Are there basic rights like that open to these prisoners of war in Azerbaijan?
So we have different protection regime concerning acknowledged and non-acknowledged prisoners of war. So those 38 who are officially acknowledged, they are being visited by ICRC, and a regular contact is maintained with the family members. But during the initial stage of captivities, there was no possibility to meet independent external authorities, including ICRC. We have documented cases where the first visit of ICRC happened 6 months after the captivity, even 6 months after. But the shortest period was, let's say, 3-4 weeks, which is against international standards. There is a requirement of immediate visit in order to document the traces of inhuman degrading treatment, torture, beatings, and so on. But this was not the case with Armenian prisoners of war. So during the initial stage of captivity, access to ICRC was denied, but later, so after 2-3 months, in some cases 6-7 months later, this contact was recovered, and now there is a regular visit once per month, once within 2 months period, depending on the situation. But for unacknowledged captives, of course, there is no such possibility. They are kept in a secrecy, and actually legal arbitrariness is not excluded towards those unacknowledged prisoners of war.
I see. Another question that's come up is, in the US, there are checks and balances between the branches of government. Yet in Armenia, Attorney Sahakyan noted the intrusion of the executive branch into the judicial branch efforts. Dr. Tatoyan also mentioned near the end of his speech. There are numerous pieces of evidence, such as damning records between judicial authorities and the executive branch. In a democratic nation, such disclosures would spell the end of one's political career. Yet in Armenia, it seems like it's business as usual. How is this possible?
First, we have different institutionalization level of state bodies and institutions. So we don't have well-established public institutions which understand their role and are functionally independent. So this is one thing which is different, and institutionally the bodies perform their tasks in the US, which is not the case in Armenia, and the individuals have more critical role in Armenia because institutions are not well established and strengthful. And the second is the culture. So of course, at the constitutional level, some checks and balance mechanism is established, but culturally this is not respected, and no political and other consequences arise when there is an attack against constitution or constitutional regulations. This is especially true when the attack comes from the executive and it's had a prime minister which has massive public support. And with this massive public support, there is no possibility to hold prime minister accountable for violating checks and balances. And so there is no room for political accountability. And through these elections, we also have seen that the nation actually accepted the results of war as well, the shameful results of war, because they re-elected and legitimized Prime Minister and gave him more energy and support to give more concessions to Azerbaijani side. So I would say we have two conditions which are totally different from US reality: mentality and culture of people, and second, this absence of strengthful public institutions, which does not prevent these unlawful activities of officials.
And maybe sorry, go ahead.
Yes, well, there is another, I would like to mention another problem. Unfortunately, in Armenia currently, everything, I would say, is centralized in the hands of one political party. And all the resources of the government serve the interests of this political party. And this political party takes all the possibilities and opportunities to use government resources for its interests. I mean, expanding, using other possibilities, and many institutions, I mean, I would say not many, but all institutions that under the constitution are formed through elections, such as elections through the parliament. Unfortunately, these officials or the heads of these institutions are appointed or are elected by one political party, because the opposition does not participate according, I mean, their practice or their policies. They do not participate in elections. So all the authorities, let's take the example of the president of the country. The president of the country is elected by one political party, and apparently he is protein and he is dependent on that political party. And this is also one of the factors that contributes to the collapse of the system of checks and balances. That is why the government has the control, or I would say, over this institution as well. But let's say, openly speaking, or the real situation is that the political party has the control over the situation. That is why this over-politicization of these institutions and centralization of the resources and the possibilities in the hands of one political party leads to open collapse of the system of checks and balances.
I see. A question directed to Dr. Tatoyan. There's a long question regarding the Lachin corridor, including Aghavno, Berdzor, Sos, and other villages. So according to the November 9 agreement, Azerbaijan is obliged to provide security for the Lachin corridor. However, they are not obliged to do so for any other passageway, including the current road under construction. Given the importance of the Lachin corridor with a 5-kilometer width and transfer of electricity, gas, and vehicles, the handover of Berdzor, Aghavno, Sos, and subsequently the Lachin corridor is in essence spelling the end for Artsakh. One of the 5 acts defined as genocide is, and I quote, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. This is happening by our government. What do you say with regards to this?
Well, this is a very right observation, that this is in comparison with the genocide and genocidal policies. Azerbaijan is openly carrying out this policy, and they do not hide their intentions, their policies, and very openly they want to cut the current only corridor, or the possibility, or the route, let's say, with Armenia. This is their ultimate purpose. And the recent escalations and their military aggressions are a result of this policy. And Azerbaijan has openly threw, away or threw into the garbage, so to say, this trilateral statement, because they are openly violating it. According to that trilateral statement, there is one and well, we have here 2 main components. First, we have still to deal with the issue that This is a genocidal policy, and their presence in these territories is a threat not only to the civilians of Aghavno and Berzor, but also Armenia, Syunik province. This is also, we should not forget about Syunik, because handing over, as you said, Berzor and Aghavno to Azerbaijan, it means also and withdrawal of our military troops from there and the peacekeeping forces. It means a location of Azerbaijani armed forces near Syunik again, relocation, let's say, and another danger from the side of Terg community, which is the last community of Syunik or Armenia, from the Terg community, their location, which is a danger for this, because Azerbaijanis anyway are located in those areas, but this will kind of lock the chain, so this to say for them. Now, when it comes to the corridor that connects Armenia with Artsakh, yes, there is.
Dr. Tatoyan.
Yes.
You froze for 5 seconds. Can you please repeat? You were talking about the corridor.
Yeah, the corridor is the only way, is the only possibility, is the only route that connects Armenia with Artsakh, apparently. And according to the trilateral statement, it should be the new plan for the new route should be considered within 3 years, and it should be considered and mutually agreed, which is not the case, unfortunately. Moreover, there is no trilateral statement does not continue details of the security and the details of location of the armed forces of Azerbaijan, peacekeeping forces, Artsakh defense armies forces next to this road, to the new road. And there is no indication and no regulation how many kilometers they should be away from that road. And there is no regulation whether they can be immediately next to that road or no. And moreover, I have also doubts about the security of the new road constructed by them, because they also build bridges. They built again, they constructed asphalt and I don't know whatever. But I highly doubt whether security-wise it can be used by our citizens. So this handing over, let's say, or closing this corridor is very, very dangerous for it presents a real danger, not only for Artsakh, which is apparently very apparent, but also for Armenia and for Armenia entirely, especially for Syunik.
Understood. This is a question to both of you. The question is, there have been a high number of hospitalizations and deaths of opposition figures under the rule of this government. Why is this tolerated? And another issue is the case of Avedik Chalabian, who has been arrested under fictitious charges. What insight can you offer on these gross violations of due process? And what is the condition of these prisoners in Armenia? Perhaps Attorney Sahakyan, you may begin.
So I wouldn't agree that they are tolerated. Of course, we have criticism in the society, and many people are supportive to these individuals who are subjected to unlawful arrest, persecution, and so on. We don't have a high number of non-governmental organizations or internationals reacting to the incident, which has political reasons. So they gave unconditional support to current government, and they remain silent on human rights violations, not only from Armenian authorities, but from Azerbaijani authorities against Armenians. But many, like the core of society, is very supportive and condemns all these prosecutions against opposition leaders. Maybe again, we tolerate because those negative developments do not lead a change of power, which is a political process and has many reasons. But legally, there is a possibility to take those cases to national courts, and after exhausting, request international protection and achieve like final acknowledgement of violations, and also compensation, and also cleaning the name and honor of persons at stake. So we would, I would advise to act strategically in legal arena, and apart from political processes which are ongoing, also follow legal protection.
Dr. Tatoyan, if you may.
Yes, well, why it is tolerated and what are the reasons that are deeply rooted, I think, and maybe this is, it needs another discussion or dedicated discussion to this problem. I would now turn to, I would like to turn to the issue, to the proceedings involving Avetik Chalaban. This is, I would say, very the proceedings itself, the proceeding itself, and the evidence on which it is based, according to monitoring and to my and I see as a professional, it really raises question and suspicions towards the evidence itself. And the problem was that when he was arrested, he's based on the evidence, and the article which was at that time incriminated to him was only in the old criminal code, and the new criminal code, which was going to be adopted in 2 months from the moment of the arrest, did not contain this article. So it was very apparent that he was going to be released in 2 months. But unfortunately, the new criminal code was changed, and this article was added to the new criminal code so that the authorities can continue keeping him under the arrest. Unfortunately, arrest is has become another problem that is, I think, abused by courts. There is a new group of judges, so-called, which are called among lawyers, even in the society. These judges are called judges who issue detention, or detention judges, so to say. These are separate judges that are in charge of investigating motions of investigators or preliminary investigation, and are in charge of authorizing detention of defendants. Unfortunately, these judges have already the reputation in the society that they are only issuing detention, and very recently we could observe even cases that contain clear elements of prosecution from the side of the judge. Even judges, and the last proceedings involving him, I think, were very openly, the judges were acting as parts of the criminal prosecution, rather a court impartial that is called to administer justice. Thank you.
Yes, one small comment. So if we expect a reaction from law enforcement authorities, there is no such possibility, because law enforcement authorities are fully dependent on the Prime Minister and are under political pressure. So we don't expect independent review of facts and opening of proceedings against political leaders. institutionally, they are not functioning independently, but we can expect reaction from the society, from some independent courts, and when domestic remedies are exhausted, also internationally.
I see. Thank you for your responses. One question for both panelists. Given that Pashinyan's government has now slid into a dictatorship where the legislative, executive, and judicial branches are all in the hands of one man and his very close loyalists, what short-term, immediate legal steps can be taken to help the political prisoners in Armenia? Dr. Tatoyan, would you like to begin first for this question?
Well, this is, I think, first of all, it is very important to ensure proper justice, and that the courts are in place and administer proper justice properly. This is the very important thing. And but when it comes to the entire situation, of course, this is also a problem of the political system of the country, because we can clearly see that there are cases where judges are under the political pressure, and they even, I can say even that, and I could observe this in my capacity as the human rights defender, some judges, even they try to please with their behavior political authorities. And this is what I was saying, that they are trying, they serve current authorities very happily and even more intensively and deeply than they were serving during the previous authorities, which is a very big problem. Of course, I have to say that we have good, by the way, impartial judges who still struggle and you know, try to administer proper justice. But we had another problem very recently, that presidents of courts were not assigning serious cases to these judges because they were afraid that they would go, so to say, out of control and may deliver judgments that are not in the interests of or do not serve, let's say, the interests of political authorities, or do not please them.
I see.
Thank you.
Attorney Sahakyan.
Yes, so we have anarchy coming from the executive. They don't care about legal rules, reputation of the country. So even if they are cognizant that in a long-term period, there would be judgments by international courts against Armenia on political prisoners, they don't care. And they focus on short and mid-term political purposes, and they use whole administrative resources in their hands to achieve the short-term political goals. So I would say that legal is not efficient under these circumstances in a short or medium term run, but long term we have good positive predictions. But I mainly rely on international protection or low chances with good judges, but definitely this will take a long term. So if we want to achieve short-term results and give more protection to political prisoners, then we need to focus on political processes. So the only way to counteract this arbitrariness, anarchy from executive would be political process.
I see. Our next question was for you, Attorney Sahakyan. It is certainly a concern if Pashinyan is quoting Baku's prisoners of war numbers instead of Armenia's estimates. It is one of several examples we have seen Pashinyan capitulate in order to favor the Azeri narrative. How do you think we can resolve the increased prisoner of war situation while the Prime Minister, head of state, is speaking the opposite of the truth?
This attitude, actions, words of Prime Minister, they really create obstacles. And we face many difficulties. We take also additional steps, think of strategies to neutralize these poisonous effects of Prime Minister's actions. But there are some ways, and we're trying to engage international actors more actively and try to solve this issue with the help of international community, including human rights organizations. So the first tactical consideration is just to have more actors in order to minimize the role of Armenian authorities acting against Armenian interest. So I think this is the possibility for us.
Mm-hmm. And a follow-up that came in for you, one more, Attorney Sahakyan, was when the issue of the prisoners of war was presented to the European Court of Human Rights, what was their reasoning for rejecting or not entertaining our concerns?
So European Court actually didn't reject our claim. So interim measures were applied by the court, but taking under protection the security, life and interest of prisoners of war. But European Court did not order release of prisoners of war, considering it out of scope of interim measures. There were very rare cases when the court took a measure which is linked to the merits of the case. Until final resolution of the case, it's hard for the court to release prisoners of war because it will concern the merits, the final demand of the case. And the court dared to order such measures when there was a huge, great political support to the organization. For example, in the case of Navalny, when the whole international community were condemning Russian authorities for unlawful detention of Navalny, and the lawyers brought requests to order immediate release of Navalny because the risks of torture in a penitentiary institution, the court exceptionally ordered this measure. But in case of Armenian prisoners of war, this measure was not applied. So the court didn't consider exceptional nature of the situation. And at that moment, there were interstate cases, Armenia versus Azerbaijan, Armenia versus Turkey. They granted some of the measures requested by Armenian side. There was some pressure from Turkish side. They sent also a diplomatic note to the president of the court, trying to use some tools to pressure the court. So the court feared to enter in this new arena. But I believe whenever there is public support, international protection, the court can feel empowered to act, which was not the case for Armenian prisoners of war. But we do have rejection from ICJ which is in the frame of interstate claimant processes. So individuals and private lawyers do not have role in these proceedings. So we can discuss whether it was tactically correct to raise this issue within third proceedings or no. But I think it's delayed, and we also do not have control over these proceedings because it is led by state on behalf of state through state representatives.
I see. Question for you, Dr. Tatoyan. This revolves around, as I'm sure you've noticed, Armenians worldwide, they are disappointed by the lack of international response. So the question particularly noted the use of cluster munitions, phosphor bombs on civilians, live broadcasting of beheadings of military and civilians. What can you offer on why there is such a lack of international response to these incidents?
This is a major problem. Unfortunately, during the war, international community was silent. International community was silent and was almost not reacting to the violations. And if they were reacting, they were mostly trying to keep the balance. And for instance, the United Nations Office for Human Rights, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, when they reacted towards the mass killings and shellings of the Karmishuka, Taghavat, other villages, they always were trying to also to say something for Artsakh or Armenia. And there were unfortunately very small cases of their reaction, and these cases were very weak. The reactions were very weak. It is very obvious that their behavior is political. International community has, as I said in my main presentation, it is a very well-established principle that human rights are universal and they do not recognize politics. And human rights violations must be subject for investigation, a reaction from international community. Unfortunately, international community was politicizing or was allowing to politicize, and whereas international organizations are there to neutralize politics and to defend, to protect human rights. But their behavior led to the decrease of the authority and the reputation of human rights and these concepts. This is pure politics. And in my meetings with these international organizations, I was openly accusing them, blaming, and openly saying that this is because of your behavior that Azerbaijan is opening up their hands and acts more aggressively. And I'm referring here not only to cluster munitions, but I'm also referring here to white phosphorus, for example, or presence of terrorists in Artsakh that were recruited or taken from Libya and northern Syria, other parts of the world, very openly. And but another problem for this, let's say, aspect is also not proper work or not properly dealing with facts from the side of our government. And there are many facts that were not presented, I think, to international instances properly. Not only Ms. Sahakyan spoke about International Court of Justice, spoke about European Court of Human Rights, but the international mechanisms are very rich, and there are many other instances where we could apply, and such as special rapporteurs for border-related issues, other relations which could be activated. So this is this would be the main answer for me.
I understand. A question for either speaker who is more aware of this case. Another blatant disregard for holding all citizens accountable is the most unfortunate killing of Sonam Natsaganyan and her unborn child by the Prime Minister's motorcade. How is this case being handled at the moment? Do you have more details? The officer responsible for the death was released initially?
Well, if I may start, this case is very openly. I mean, unfortunately, after the incident when this young lady was killed, pregnant lady, unfortunately, some fake profiles that are largely supported by the government, or they are supporting the government, let's say government affiliated, so let's say fake profiles, started to put the responsibility on this young lady, on the victim who was killed, and started to bring her under the so-called public, pressure and the morals, so to say, so that it was her that was responsible and was guilty, let's say, in the behavior, and she should be blamed and accused for breaching the rules. But
may I clarify? You are saying after her death, there were fake,
after her death, yes, after the
fake
case,
profiles,
fake profiles, government affiliated fake profiles, not only fake profiles, but also real people who were trying to put the responsibility and did everything to put the responsibility on this young lady.
Upon a dead woman.
Yes, so that she breached the rules, and she was the responsible, let's say, side. She should have been cautious, and she did not have the right to cross the street from that place, and other things. But it is very apparent for me that this was the responsibility of the person who was being escorted at that time, and of course the escorting team, let's say, including the police officers. Yes, the police officer is released. He was detained, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he was detained for the beginning, and then very shortly he was released. I'm not aware about the current state of the case, but the problem is that, as we see, I would say the main problem here is in the approach and the attitude of authorities. Instead of bringing public apologies to this young lady, to her family, for this incident, they started to blame them for violating or breaching the rules, whereas it is, I think, very openly they were the responsible ones. Even according to, we analyzed at the time also international conventions, international rules, even relating to these situations, the security rules vis-a-vis human rights protection. Apparently, the government was or the person who was being escorted, in this case, the prime minister, especially they said that he could control, he could give instructions to the escorting team while they were after the incident, because there were some statements that he noticed it. So anyway, this is I think it shows, it was also very shameful, the attitude of the government, how they treated this case and how they tried to put the responsibility on the side of the victim.
Mm-hmm. Attorney Sahakyan, would you like to comment also on this question?
Yes, so the family has concerns about the risk of politicization of the case, and it is not in the interest of the case to have this political connotation, because it will deprive them of the possibility of independent investigation of the facts. Of course, they applied for legal services, like the prominent lawyers are working on the case, and they are considering also this international aspect because of the possibilities of biased investigation and impunity because of the perpetrators' connection with political elite. But also forensic expertise and other types of examinations are important evidence. So currently this evidence is being collected, but I mean, there are people who are involved in this process, and they take it serious, and they're going to fight for the justice for this family.
Thank you very much. This was very insightful from both of you. Our next question is regarding the displaced citizens of Artsakh. So the question is asking for both of you to answer, what rights do they have in terms of rights within the Artsakh government, within the Armenian government, or in the international community as well, the displaced citizens of Artsakh?
Well, I know that the Artsakh government has some projects, and they already announced that they are going to issue certificates of certain amount of money to be provided to them so that they can buy new houses. But you know, this is an Armenian government apparently has also certain obligations, positive obligations to protect our compatriots, since the government is also assisting and providing. And they announced very recently, there were very high-level political announcements from the Armenian side that Armenia is by side, you know, of Artsakh, and Armenia will never abandon Artsakh, and they are providing some money. So this is exact place and time to prove that their political statements go in line with their steps. And instead of blaming these people, they have to help, and not instead of supporting them to become an internally displaced person, they have to help them to find their houses, you know, first of all. And unfortunately, these people are, I would say, deprived of international remedies because Artsakh is not a recognized state, and their citizens have no, in this sense, are suffering for not having access to international remedies. But still, the government, of course, has to help them, and Armenian government has #1 responsibility for these people to protect our compatriots. And our Armenian government has no right to abandon Artsakh, neither politically nor legally in any sense, and not even taking account about their huge responsibility and Armenia's role in protecting these people.
Thank you, Dr. Tatoyan. Attorney Sahakyan.
So I think they provided very low compensation as an interim solution for the situation, but there is no well-designed programs concerning housing, rehabilitation, and more towards this group. We know that there are also promises from Armenian government within this interstate claim. Armenian government included all property cases. And from the data of state cadastre, they collected information of all owners whose property gone to Azerbaijani side, and they included this claim against Azerbaijan, and they give promises to families that they'll try to get this compensation for their houses and laws through European court. But what we know from previous case, because we already have property cases dealt by the court, this compensation is very symbolic. For example, the Armenian family which has fled from Sahakyan region during the First War, received the judgment only in 2010. So very long period after, and the compensation was just $5,000 for pecuniary damage, non-pecuniary damage, and judicial costs. So this was very symbolic compensation from international court, because they see the way of solution not compensation awarded by the court, but establishment of commissions already mixed, who can nationally deal with refugees and consider whether a return is possible, and if not, calculate and give some compensation. So these promises are given to refugees, which is of course misleading, but like these people have hopes that in a short period of time, through these legal actions, they can receive compensation from Azerbaijan. And also this compensation policy is of discriminatory nature. We have encountered this discrimination concerning a business who run this hydro station in Nagorno-Karabakh, and in a region which was surrendered not through hostilities, but with the consent of Armenia, and they considered the affiliation of owners with political elite. So they compensated some of the owners because they were pro-governmental, and denied any compensation to other owners who were affiliated with old representatives of government. So this compensation is of discriminatory nature and considers also political stand approach of the victims. And finally, a few days ago, there was an announcement by a high-level official that those who dare to fire their houses while fleeing will not receive any compensation. This was a response to some practice when Armenians they fired their own houses not to leave good conditions for Azerbaijani who will later occupy, and some precautionary measures were taken now by Armenian government to prevent harm by refugees to their own houses, because they will be transferred to Azerbaijani side.
I see.
This is a signal. And when we were covering also the issue of support of international community and pro-Armenian stand, I think these small symbols are important. Why should international community intervene if they are witnessing close dialogue between Armenian and Azerbaijani authorities and public satisfaction from Armenian side to Azerbaijani authorities?
I see. Thank you. The final two questions we have are regarding the role that the diaspora can play. So the audience is interested in understanding both of your perspectives on what Armenians outside of Armenia can do to help the situation. The first is going back to Avedik Chalabian. It is clear that the government would like to see him behind bars as long as possible, as he presents an articulate and patriotic alternative without the Nakhkin baggage. What can be done to hasten his release and that of other political prisoners? And we know that the Armenian Bar Association issued a statement in his support, but he was imprisoned again, despite the prosecutor not deeming him to be a flight risk. So for both of you, what steps can we take from the diaspora to help in this situation with Avedik?
Well, I think this is the way that diaspora acts, I mean, in terms of, in sense of making statements, working with international organizations, trying to bring to their attention this problem, this issue. This can be organizations such as UN, human rights structures, OSCE, I don't know, other, but intergovernmental organizations that could be aware about the situation and the details. It is also, I think, important to work with the facts and maybe to cooperate with the lawyers. I know that they're very active, and to present to international organizations facts and concrete analysis rather than sending them letters with general formulations, which very often may not reach the real addressees, let's say, and the people who are in charge of real things. Yes, this could be my advice, to be more concrete and to cooperate with lawyers to present concrete facts to international community.
Thank you, Dr. Tatoyan.
Starting from Avedik Chalabyan's case, well, we need pressure from international governmental, non-governmental organizations on our authorities, which is hard to receive because, again, our government has unconditional support from many sides of the world, American, Western, also Russian, because they undertook the mission of concessions at the stake of Armenian interest to give room for these players to improve their relations with Turkey and Azerbaijan. And when I'm comparing the situation where a single small incident of human rights violation happened before 2018, the international community was really very responsive. And also they instigated local NGOs to respond to such violations, giving more scale than the violation had. But now they have the other tendency, trying to make smaller, even huge human rights violations or threats to democracy. The one I mentioned, for example, attack against constitutional court, because they have arrangements with Armenian authorities as well. But I don't see that our Armenian government will respect the rights of political prisoners without the pressure of international communities. So I think diaspora should activate its efforts to work with international community, individual states, to respond properly to the wrongs done. Otherwise, the struggle is in a political arena. And I think every individual having an intention to campaign with current Prime Minister will realize or should realize the threats against its liberty and other rights. So culturally, we don't have constraints to prevent prosecution against promising competitors. So this is our condition. The other issue would be how to correctly arrange the political fight to be successful after all these risks and restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Then to close, one final question the audience would like to hear your thoughts on for both of you is, can you provide maybe some predictions, or how do you see the political process play out in Armenia over the next few months? What can the diaspora expect to see happening? Dr. Tatoyan, if you would like to start.
I would reflect on the role of diaspora. I think it is more than ever important to be connected with the motherland. And it is more than ever important to have and to keep the national unity and solidarity. You know, currently, unfortunately, the policies of current authorities are dividing our nation, and they have already divided, and we have divisions not only inside Armenia but outside of our country, and divisions inside the diaspora. Unfortunately, all of us already know about these divisions, which is a huge problem, and we have to realize that we are one nation, and our people need solidarity. And you know, to me, it is very evident that we do not have you know, enemies inside our nation amongst us, and we have to have our solidarity. And I would invite our compatriots from diaspora to visit Armenia very often, to visit Artsakh to the extent possible. And there are now many ways of contacting, cooperating with Artsakh as well, if physical visits are not possible, through Zoom, online, I don't know, different other ways. But my advice would be to our members of our communities, our compatriots, if you come to Armenia and you see in cafes, restaurants, many happy people, I think this is not real Armenia. Real Armenia, you will see real Armenia if you go to Syunik, if you go to Shirak, if you go to Lori, to regions, to villages, if you go to villages of Gerarkonik, to see how people live there. This is real Armenia. And support now coming from diaspora, I don't mean financial, of course, support, not necessarily. I mean support in sense of showing to Armenians that diaspora is with Armenia. And I have to say that Armenians who live here also have to do the same. Even I have an idea that we have to stop all these divisions, you know, Armenians from, I don't know, different countries, different classes of Armenians or sorts of Armenians. This is very problematic for the future of our nation and of our people. If we want prosperity, if we want to develop, if we want renaissance, we have to be united, and we need solidarity. This would be my advice, invitation, and the request to our compatriots.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tatoyan. Attorney Sahakyan, please.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's very dangerous to visualize, to expose the separation of diaspora and Armenia, also because of different approaches on Armenia-Turkish or other key issues. Because this exposure of contradiction, controversies just shows the weakness. And I'm sure even if we unite the efforts, some of the issues will be difficult to achieve because Azerbaijani Turkish propaganda, advocacy, diplomacy is very strengthful. So even with unity, it will be hard for us to neutralize separated, and we show the world, then we eliminate any chances of success on our national issues. So, so internally we can have many controversies, but especially on external issues, we should act unified. And the second, I think diaspora should invest more in educating Armenian people and implement more programs of social, cultural nature. So helping in political processes, it's very important. But before that, some infrastructure need to be established. And the key infrastructure are the people with certain mentality, ideology, and vision. So I think the best investment would be to achieve change of mind in people, especially those who elected Pashinyan as a leader and who support the steps which are directly against our state and interest. So we need to achieve this shift among the society to have better leaders in the future.
Understood. Thank you both very much for your comments. In closing, we'd like to thank our panelists for their thoughtful comments. It's unfortunately painfully clear that there is a systematic effort in place to make life difficult and unbearable for Armenians in Armenia, such as in Kagharkunik and Syunik, and especially in Artsakh. These are calculated genocidal steps undertaken by our enemy, and the fictitious peace dialogue is a smokescreen for the international community to veil the atrocities committed against our people. The most difficult component of this situation is the complete abdication of responsibilities by the Armenian authorities, which not only aids and abets the enemy, but also provides the international community with cover against taking any meaningful steps. Most detrimentally, the Armenian government acts against the direct interests of the nation in lockstep with our enemies. We see the erosion of rule of law and due process in Armenia, all designed to further remove Armenians from taking charge of their own destiny. There is only so much negative news, stress, and difficulty a person can take before they detach and stop paying attention, even if it is detrimental to their well-being and to that of their offspring in the long run. Yet, we cannot and will not cede our right to take our destiny in our own hands. We must focus on further strengthening the unbreakable bond between Armenia and the diaspora as one nation, and leveraging all levers of power and influence from within Armenia and from the international community to effect positive change. We must voice our opposition to the treacherous behavior of the current government and actively work towards their removal from power. However, most importantly, we must present a tangible and effective plan for the nation to rally behind and to believe in its ability to thrive once again. Thank you again very much to our panelists and to all our guests for their participation. Thank you.